The morning sun stretched lazily across the neighborhood as Keanu Reeves rolled his sleek electric bike down the driveway. The world was quiet, the kind of stillness he loved, birds chatting softly, a light breeze drifting through the trees, and the distant hum of the city waking up. For Keanu, that calm had a purpose today. He wasn't heading out for a ride. He was on a mission. Neighborhood kids had been complaining for weeks that their e-bikes kept dying when they were halfway home. Delivery workers were forced to sit under trees waiting for enough battery to crawl back to the main road. And a few elderly folks who used mobility scooters had to leave them inside because there was nowhere outside to recharge safely. It bothered Keanu deeply. "It shouldn't be this hard to get around your own neighborhood," he had muttered last night while staring at a half-finished blueprint on his dining table. So today, Keanu decided to fix it. He had spent the past week quietly ordering parts, weatherproof charging outlets, a solar panel kit, extra safe wiring, and a sturdy wooden frame he could assemble himself. No big company, no complicated permits, just Keanu, some tools, and a desire to make life easier for everyone around him. He walked to the corner of his driveway and tapped the dusty post of an old neighborhood sign. "No one uses this anyway," he chuckled softly. The perfect spot for his project. Shady, accessible, and harmless. He laid out his tools, cracked his knuckles, and got to work. As the morning hours passed, neighbors slowed down on their morning walks, curiosity tugging them closer. Mrs. Henderson, the 76-year-old scooter rider, stopped at the edge of the driveway and lifted her sunglasses. "Keanu, sweetheart, what are you building now?" "A little something for anyone who needs a charge," he answered, tightening a bolt. "Thought it might help folks like you get around easier." Her eyes softened. "You're a blessing, you know that." Keanu smiled. "Just trying to make things better." And with that, he continued. Piece by piece, the structure took shape, simple, functional, and surprisingly beautiful. The wooden frame held a sleek solar panel, angled perfectly toward the rising sun. 2 charging ports sat beneath it, sheltered under a small canopy. Keanu even added a small bench on the side, using leftover planks he had sanded smooth. When he stepped back to admire it, he realized it looked like something out of a cozy eco-park. And he hadn't even stained the wood yet. Before he could fetch the finishing coat, a group of kids zoomed up on their e-bikes. Their faces lit up instantly. "Is this for us?" one asked, almost in disbelief. "For everyone," Keanu said, plugging in an orange cable. "Go ahead, try it." The boy pushed his bike forward and snapped the charger in. A little green light blinked on. "Whoa, it works." Another kid tried the second port. Same result, green light, wide grin. They high-fived like it was Christmas morning. Keanu laughed. Moments like this were the fuel of his soul, small gestures that echoed louder than words. But just as the neighborhood was beginning to gather and marvel at his creation, a sharp, icy voice sliced through the warm atmosphere. "What is this?" Keanu didn't even need to turn around to know. He felt the chill before he saw her. Margaret Delacroix, president of the HOA, walking toward him with the stiff posture of someone ready to file a complaint against the breeze. Her eyes scanned the structure like it was a crime scene. One eyebrow twitched upward. "Is that a charging station?" Keanu wiped his hands on his jeans. "Yes, free to use. Powered by solar, safe, eco-friendly." "That is not the issue," she snapped. "You installed an unauthorized power distribution unit." Keanu blinked. "It's a solar charger." "Exactly," she said as if he had confessed. "This sort of thing encourages excessive freedom." He stared at her. "Excessive what?" "Freedom," she repeated. "People will start gathering here. They will linger, congregate, socialize freely. This is a residential neighborhood, not an unregulated community hub." The kids whispered to each other in disbelief. Mrs. Henderson shook her head and rolled her scooter closer, hands on her hips. Keanu stayed calm, but inside, a storm brewed. He had built something to help people. Something harmless. Something kind. And now he was being treated like a criminal because it might make the neighborhood, too friendly. Margaret pulled a clipboard from her bag with the precision of a sword being unsheathed. "I will be writing an immediate notice of violation. This structure will have to be removed within 48 hours. Keanu exhaled slowly, trying to stay patient. His eyes moved from the kids' disappointed faces to Mrs. Henderson's worried expression, then back to the solar station glinting proudly in the sunlight. He wasn't removing anything. Not without a fight. Keanu stood silently as Margaret stormed away, her heels clacking like an approaching thunderstorm that never quite left. The neighbors dispersed slowly, whispering among themselves, exchanging looks of frustration and disbelief. Keanu could feel the weight of their disappointment. He wasn't angry, he rarely was, but he felt something deeper, a quiet resolve forming like a stone settling firmly into place. He turned back toward the charging station, its solar panel catching the sun as if it were proudly standing with him in defiance. There was nothing harmful here. Just help. Just kindness. Just community. Why was that such a threat? He walked into his garage, wiping the sweat from his forehead as he pulled off his gloves. The garage was his sanctuary, filled with half-finished projects, tools arranged neatly on pegboards, and blueprints taped to the wall. He studied the charging station sketch again, the same one he had spent nights perfecting. Every measurement, every material, every safety feature, it was all carefully thought out. He wasn't some reckless neighbor causing problems. He was someone trying to offer solutions. Keanu took a deep breath and scribbled a small note in the corner of the blueprint. Asterisk, if something is right, you have to stand by it. Asterisk. Just then, a soft knock echoed from the front door. When he opened it, Mrs. Henderson stood there with a tray of freshly baked muffins, her scooter humming beside her. Thought you might need a morale boost, dear, she said, offering the tray. Her eyes were gentle but determined. That woman has gone too far this time. It's a charging station, not a nightclub. Keanu chuckled softly and invited her inside. She parked her scooter and looked around his living room, still holding on to the indignation from earlier. You know, she continued, biting into a muffin, when my scooter died near the park last month, I sat under a tree for 40 minutes waiting for it to recover. What you built, it matters. People need these things. I need these things. Her words struck him deeper than he expected. Keanu nodded slowly. I just want people to feel supported, to have something small that makes their day easier. Mrs. Henderson reached out and patted his hand. And that's exactly why they're upset. Because kindness makes people gather. Because solutions bring people together. And the HOA, they hate anything that isn't controlled by them. She scoffed. Encouraging excessive freedom. What does that even mean? We're human beings, not paperwork. A sudden buzz broke their conversation, Keanu's phone lighting up on the table. A message from a neighborhood group chat flashed across the screen. He opened it cautiously. Dozens of unread messages, photos of the charging station, angry comments about the HOA, neighbors asking how they could help, some offering to sign petitions, others pointing out how their kids relied on e-bikes for school. As Keanu scrolled, message after message poured in. Asterisk, we'll stand with you. Asterisk, asterisk, don't take it down. Asterisk, asterisk, this helps us more than the HOA ever has. Asterisk, one message from a food delivery rider hit the hardest. Asterisk, I charge my bike at coffee shops while losing time and money. Your charger could change my whole day. Asterisk. Keanu looked up at Mrs. Henderson, who was already smirking knowingly. See, she said, you started something bigger than a charging station. He stood up, pacing slowly as the reality settled in. This wasn't about a piece of equipment. This was about community, independence, and dignity. The HOA wasn't fighting a structure. They were fighting the idea that people could support one another without going through them. Keanu paused by the window, watching the kids still circling the charging station outside, their bikes buzzing joyfully as if the station itself were celebrating. He turned back to Mrs. Henderson with a quiet fire in his eyes. If they want a fight, we'll give them one. But not with anger. With facts, with people, with proof this is helping. Mrs. Henderson raised her muffin like a toast. That's the spirit, sweetheart. Keanu grabbed his notebook and started writing, mapping out what he would need. Signatures, testimonies, data about the benefits, safety certificates, everything the HOA did not expect him to have. For the first time, he wasn't doing something quietly. This time, the whole neighborhood was behind him. As the afternoon sunlight shifted across the room, Keanu felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. The HOA could file their notices, write their warnings, even threaten fines. But what they couldn't stop was a community that finally realized it had a voice. And if that voice needed someone to stand at the front, calm and steady, Keanu was ready. The charging station wasn't going anywhere. In fact, this was only the beginning. The next morning dawned brighter than usual, as if the sun itself had chosen sides in the quiet war brewing in the neighborhood. Keanu stepped outside with a fresh cup of coffee and was stunned by what he saw. Gathered around the charging station were nearly a dozen neighbors, kids, parents, elderly folks, delivery riders, even a couple of joggers, talking, laughing, and taking turns plugging in their bikes and scooters. Some had brought tools to fix their bikes. Others brought lemonade. A few simply came to sit on the little bench he built. What was meant to be a simple utility had already become a gathering place, a small hub of life on a street that had long felt suffocated by silent rules. As Keanu walked closer, the conversations paused momentarily before erupting into greetings. "Keanu, you're the man," one teenager shouted. A delivery rider hopped off his bike and clapped him on the back. "This thing saved me an hour today, bro." Mrs. Henderson proudly held up her fully charged scooter like a victory trophy. "Runs smoother than ever." For a moment, Keanu let himself feel the warmth. These weren't customers, fans, or strangers. They were neighbors. People whose daily struggles often went unnoticed. And here they were, united around something he created with nothing more than goodwill and a toolbox. But the moment didn't last long. From down the street came the unmistakable sound of polished heels striking concrete, sharp, rhythmic, and filled with irritation. Margaret Delacroix appeared, flanked by two stern-faced HOA board members holding clipboards as if they were sacred artifacts. The cheerful air around the charging station tightened instantly. Conversations died. Kids backed up. Even the delivery riders took a step away. Margaret stopped in front of the crowd, hands on her hips, giving a strained smile that didn't reach her eyes. My. Quite the unauthorized gathering," she said, scanning the people like they were violating oxygen regulations. Keanu took a slow sip of his coffee. "Good morning, Margaret." She ignored the greeting entirely and instead snapped her fingers at the board members, who immediately began taking photos of the charging station from every angle, like paparazzi documenting a crime scene. "We are here to conduct an official compliance inspection," she declared loudly, ensuring every soul within 50 feet could hear. "This device," she pointed dramatically, "is in violation of Article 14, Section C, subsection Freedom-Related Disturbances." One of the board members read from his clipboard, monotone, "HOA properties must not be used to encourage gatherings, lingering, loitering, or unnecessary social interactions." The absurdity hung in the air like a bad smell. A kid whispered, "So, we're not allowed to be friendly?" Margaret marched closer to Keanu. "And you, Mr. Reeves, have ignored our notice of violation. You have exactly 24 hours left to dismantle this contraption or face daily fines." Instead of reacting, Keanu gently set his coffee cup down on the bench. "Actually," he said calmly, pulling a folder from under his arm, "I have something for you." He handed it to her. She opened it and froze. Inside were printed testimonials from neighbors, photos showing riders safely using the station, signatures from over 70 residents supporting the project, and, most importantly, certificates verifying the charger's safety standards. Margaret's left eye twitched. Where did you get all this?" she stammered. "People came together," Keanu said simply. "They shared their stories, their struggles, their needs. I just helped organize it." The neighbors murmured their agreement. A delivery rider stepped forward. "Lady, I work 10 hours a day in the heat. This charger saves me time and money. Why would you want to take that away?" Mrs. Henderson rolled up on her scooter. "You'd rather fine a man for helping us than admit the rulebook is outdated." The tension rippled through the crowd, but this time it didn't shrink. They stood taller, stronger. For the first time, Margaret looked unsettled. She turned back to her board members, whispering urgently. They whispered back. She straightened her blazer, cleared her throat, and announced, "Well, regardless of your collective emotional essays, we must still conduct a formal review." But everyone could see it, the crack in her confidence. The power she always commanded wasn't landing the same way. Not with the neighborhood standing behind Keanu like a quiet army. As she stormed away, defeated but not yet willing to admit it, the crowd slowly relaxed again. A teenager nudged Keanu. "Dude, you totally broke the HOA." Keanu chuckled softly. "No, we reminded them who this neighborhood belongs to." The people nodded, a newfound unity hanging in the air. And as the sun climbed higher, shining off the solar panel, Keanu felt the shift. This wasn't just about a charger anymore. This was about community reclaiming itself. One plug, one signature, one small act of kindness at a time. By the following afternoon, the neighborhood seemed to pulse with a quiet determination. People weren't just using the charging station, they were defending it. Flyers supporting Keanu's project appeared on doorsteps. A few kids even drew posters reading, "Let us charge," and taped them to street poles. Word had spread fast, and suddenly, Keanu found himself at the center of something bigger than convenience. He hadn't asked for attention, but attention had come, drawn like a magnet to the idea that community could still exist without permission slips and punishments. So when a notice arrived taped to his door saying the HOA board would hold an emergency meeting at 6 p.m. to decide the fate of the charger, Keanu knew it was time. All day, neighbors drifted by with encouragement, homemade food, handshakes, thumbs up, and quick messages like, "We've got your back." Even people Keanu barely knew stood beside him like old friends. As the sun dipped lower, he changed into a simple dark shirt, tucked his folder under his arm, and walked toward the HOA community hall. He didn't need a speech. He didn't need theatrics. He just needed the truth. When he arrived, he was surprised to find the building surrounded by residents, some on scooters, some on bikes, others simply there to stand witness. They potted for him like he was stepping into a courtroom. Inside, the hall felt colder than usual. Margaret and the board sat at a long table in the front, clipboards lined up like shields. Rows of folding chairs faced them, but today they were filled, standing room only, neighbors packed shoulder to shoulder. Whispered conversations buzzed in the air. Margaret banged a tiny wooden gavel, dramatically unnecessary for such a small space. "We call this emergency meeting to order," she said, her voice sharp. The primary topic, unauthorized construction on community property. She motioned stiffly toward Keanu. "Mr. Reeves, as the individual responsible for the installation, you may begin your defense." Keanu stepped forward calmly, placing his folder on the podium. He took a breath, letting the silence settle. "I didn't build a nightclub. I didn't build a noise disturbance. I built a solar-powered charging station, one that helps kids get home, helps seniors move freely, helps delivery workers earn their living. It's safe, it's clean, and it harms no one." He opened his folder and held up the safety certificates. "This charger meets every electrical and environmental requirement. I checked. Twice." He placed them on the board's table. "And it clearly fills a need in this neighborhood." Margaret leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "The issue is not safety, Mr. Reeves. It's control. You have encouraged unregulated gatherings and," she adjusted her glasses, "excessive freedom." A wave of murmurs swept through the hall. Keanu didn't react. Instead, he held up the stack of signed testimonials. "These are statements from your neighbors. 73 of them. Real people. Real stories. All saying one thing: this charging station makes their lives better." He handed them off to a board member, who flipped through the papers with widening eyes. "You talk about freedom like it's a problem," Keanu continued softly. "But freedom is what lets a community breathe." For a moment, the room was still. Then a delivery rider stood. "I work until midnight. Before this station, I used to sit outside gas stations waiting for enough charge to get home. This thing saves me time, man. Why would you take that away?" A mother raised her hand. "My son uses his e-bike to get to school. He doesn't have to beg for rides anymore." Mrs. Henderson rolled her scooter closer to the front. "I rely on mobility. I rely on kindness." And Keanu. He gave both. More voices rose. Calmly, respectfully, powerfully. The board exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't the quiet, controllable crowd they were used to. Margaret tried to speak, but the momentum had shifted. A board member cleared his throat awkwardly. Given the overwhelming community support and the verified safety compliance, he looked at the stack of signatures again. I believe further discussion is necessary before enforcement action. Margaret snapped her glare toward him, but he didn't flinch. The room buzzed. Another board member nodded reluctantly. Yes, perhaps we should hold a full community vote. It was the first time the board had ever backed away from immediate punishment. The tension softened. People exchanged hopeful glances. Keanu simply exhaled, slow, steady, calm. Margaret slammed her gavel again, clearly losing control. Fine, a vote. But until then, the structure remains under review. She stood abruptly, gathering her papers, but the room no longer bent to her authority. Neighbors stood tall, united, energized. Keanu stepped back as people surrounded him with gratitude. The meeting wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a turning point. They weren't alone anymore. They weren't silent. And the HOA had just learned something they hadn't expected. A community united around kindness was far harder to control than a single man with a toolbox. The morning of the vote arrived with an unusual electricity in the air, pun intended. The neighborhood buzzed like a hive coming alive at sunrise. People walked with purpose. Kids decorated their bikes with little signs, charge equals freedom. Thanks Keanu, asterisk, let us ride. Asterisk delivery riders honked cheerfully as they passed. Even those who rarely left their homes peeked from windows or stepped onto porches, curious, invested, awake in a way the community hadn't felt in years. Keanu watched from his driveway, coffee in hand, the charging station humming quietly beside him. He never meant for it to become a symbol, but it had. And today, that symbol faced its defining moment. By noon, the HOA's voting tent, normally used for dull annual budget approvals, was surrounded by residents, forming a lively crowd that felt more like a block party than a bureaucratic event. There were coolers of lemonade, folding chairs, and kids zipping around on half-charged e-bikes. Someone even set up a portable speaker playing soft music. It was peaceful, warm, and beautifully human. Keanu didn't campaign or make speeches. He simply watched, appreciating each person who walked by with a reassuring nod or supportive smile. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about everyone. Inside the tent, ballots were collected carefully by volunteer residents, not HOA board members who had reluctantly agreed to remain neutral after yesterday's intense meeting. Margaret, however, hovered nearby like a hawk eyeing prey. Her posture was stiff, her smile tighter than a locked drawer. Every time someone dropped in a ballot, she frowned as if each paper personally betrayed her. She spotted Keanu approaching and crossed her arms. I hope you understand, she said coldly, that even if this project is approved, it sets a dangerous precedent. We can't have neighbors building whatever they want on community property. Keanu met her gaze calmly. Maybe the real danger, he said softly, is forgetting that this neighborhood is made of people, not rules. That single sentence lingered between them, heavy and undeniable. Margaret opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came. She simply turned away, muttering something about procedures. Hours passed. Ballots were counted inside the tent while the crowd waited outside. The sun dipped gently toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the street. People grew quieter with anticipation, gathering near the podium as the board stepped forward with the results. This was it. The end of weeks of tension, arguments, unity, and hope. Keanu folded his arms loosely, his expression steady, though his heart beat just a little faster. The board's vice president, a gentleman with silver hair who seemed exhausted by the entire ordeal, cleared his throat. After counting all ballots, he said, glancing at the paper in his hand, "The neighborhood has voted." He paused, looking out at the sea of nervous faces. Asterisk asterisk 87% in favor of keeping the solar charging station as a permanent community resource. Asterisk asterisk, for a moment, the world froze. Then the cheers erupted like fireworks. People clapped, shouted, hugged. Kids zoomed around the station in loops of celebration. Mrs. Henderson wiped a tear from her eye before raising both arms triumphantly. Delivery riders high-fived each other. Even board members cracked hesitant smiles. Keanu simply closed his eyes for a second, letting the relief wash over him. Not victory, relief. The kind that tells you your intention was understood, your effort was valued, and your community had chosen kindness. When he opened his eyes, people were rushing toward him, thanking him, praising him, laughing with him. You did it. We did it. This is your legacy, man. Keanu shook his head humbly. It's our legacy, he corrected softly. But one person did not celebrate. Margaret stood rigid at the edge of a tent, clutching her clipboard with white knuckles. Her face was a mix of disbelief and frustration, yet something else too. Acceptance. She looked at the crowd, then at Keanu, and for the first time, her expression softened. Not much, but enough. She approached him quietly, the cheers still roaring in the background. It seems, she said with a stiff sigh, the community has spoken. Keanu offered a gentle smile. That's all anyone ever wanted. As the sun finally set, the neighborhood glowed, not from streetlights, but from something more powerful, unity. People lingered long after the vote, chatting, celebrating, sharing stories under the warm evening sky. Kids charged their bikes again, just for fun. Mrs. Henderson took her scooter for a proud victory lap. The charging station stood proudly at the center of it all, the simple idea that brought the neighborhood back to life. Keanu stepped back, hands in his pockets, watching the scene unfold with quiet contentment. A neighbor approached him with a grin. So, what's your next project? Keanu chuckled softly. Something small, he said. Something helpful. Because that's all it ever took, a small act of kindness to spark a community revolution.